started with turbulence. A red-eye flight to Seattle, 4 armed hijackers, and a woman in first class who refused to scream until a quiet single dad from row 8 stood up and changed everything. He thought it was just instinct kicking in. She knew it was the moment that would unravel fortunes, test loyalties, and land a private jet on his front lawn by sunrise. What he didn't expect was that saving her life at 30,000 feet would force him to rebuild his own from the ground up. Easton Brooks wasn't looking for recognition, wasn't searching for redemption. He was just a carpenter trying to get home to his daughter. But Clara Jennings, CEO of one of the most powerful tech empires in the world, saw something in him that night. Something she hadn't seen in boardrooms full of polished executives. Courage without ego, strength without performance, and a heart that didn't need a spotlight to shine. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The cabin lights flickered once, then steadied. Easton Brooks barely noticed. He sat in row 8, aisle seat, hands folded on the tray table, staring at nothing in particular. The hum of the engines was constant, reliable, the kind of white noise that let a tired man think without interruption. He wasn't supposed to be on this flight. The original plan had been to drive back from the conference in Portland, take his time, maybe stop at that diner near the Oregon border that still served real blueberry pancakes. But his daughter, Sophie, had called that morning with a fever and a voice small enough to break through his usual resolve. "Daddy, when are you coming home?" she'd asked. So he changed his ticket, paid the extra fee, and boarded the last red-eye to Seattle. Now, at 11:47 p.m., somewhere over the Cascade Range, Easton was one of 43 passengers trying to sleep, scroll, or survive the boredom of a 2-hour flight. Most had their headphones in. A few were working on laptops. One man snored lightly 3 rows back. Up in first class, separated by a thin curtain and an invisible wall of wealth, sat Clara Jennings. Easton didn't know her name yet. Didn't know that her face had been on the cover of Forbes twice in the last year. Didn't know she'd just closed a deal worth $800 million, or that the leather briefcase at her feet contained contracts that could shift the entire markets. All he knew was that she looked exhausted. He'd noticed her during boarding, the way she moved with precision but not arrogance. The way she thanked the flight attendant without looking up from her phone. She wore a charcoal blazer, no jewelry except a silver watch, and her hair was pulled back in a way that said efficiency over style. Then everything changed. The first indication was the sound. Not loud, but sharp. A metallic click from the front of the cabin, followed by a woman's startled gasp. Easton's eyes snapped open fully. His body stiffened, instincts waking before his mind caught up. A man stood at the front of the aisle. Tall, wiry, wearing a black hoodie and a surgical mask. In his right hand, something small and dark. A gun. "Nobody moves," the man said, voice flat and cold. "Nobody makes a sound." 3 more figures rose from their seats. One near the emergency exit, one in the middle, one blocking the aisle to coach, all armed, all coordinated. The cabin exploded into silent terror. A teenager clutched her mother's arm. An older man in a business suit froze mid-reach for his phone. The flight attendant near the galley took a half-step back, eyes wide, hands trembling. Easton didn't move. Not yet. His breathing slowed, his vision sharpened. He scanned the cabin methodically, the way someone who'd spent years building structures learned to assess weak points and load-bearing walls. 4 hijackers. Handguns, maybe 1 knife. No visible explosives. Coordinated but not military. Nervous energy from the one near the exit. Amateur hour? Dangerous, but not unstoppable. The lead hijacker stepped forward, gesturing with a weapon. Phones out, wallets, watches, jewelry, everything in the bag. You cooperate, you land safely. You play hero, people die. A black duffel bag began moving down the aisle. Passengers dropped their belongings into it with shaking hands. Some cried quietly. Others sat frozen, faces drained of color. Then the hijacker reached first class. He stopped in front of Clara Jennings. She sat perfectly still, hands on the armrests, eyes forward, not defiant, not submissive, just present. "You," the man said, leaning closer. "I know who you are." Clara didn't respond. "Clara Jennings, Next Gen Industries. Read about you in the news." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Bet you've got something valuable in that briefcase." "It's just contracts," she said evenly. "Paperwork. Nothing you'd want." "I'll decide that." He reached for the case. Clara's hand moved just slightly to block it. "Those documents are encrypted, useless to anyone but me." The hijacker's expression darkened. He raised the gun, pressing it against her temple. "I don't care about encryption." That's when Easton stood up. He didn't announce himself, didn't shout or charge. He simply rose from row 8, stepped into the aisle, and began walking forward. Calm, steady, hands visible. The second hijacker, stationed near the middle, noticed first. "Hey, sit down." Easton kept walking. "I said sit down." The man moved toward him, gun raised. Easton closed the distance faster than expected. In one fluid motion, he grabbed the hijacker's wrist, twisted it sharply upward, and drove his knee into the man's ribs. The gun clattered to the floor. Easton caught it before it hit the ground, released the magazine with a practiced flick, and tossed both pieces into separate rows. The cabin erupted into chaos. The lead hijacker spun toward Easton, weapon still trained on Clara. "Don't move or she dies." Easton stopped, his eyes locked onto the man's. No fear, no hesitation, just cold calculation. "You're not going to shoot her," Easton said quietly. "Because if you do, you lose your leverage. And you need leverage because your friend just lost his weapon, your plan is falling apart, and in about 3 minutes, this cockpit door is going to open and you'll have bigger problems than me." The hijacker's jaw tightened. His hand wavered slightly. That's when Clara moved. She drove her elbow backward into the hijacker's stomach, twisted out of her seat, and slammed her knee into his wrist. The gun dropped. Easton lunged forward, catching it midair, and in the same motion, tackled the man to the ground. The third and fourth hijackers scrambled toward them, but passengers had found their courage. A middle-aged man in row 5 swung a laptop bag into one hijacker's face. 2 college students tackled the other near the emergency exit. Within 90 seconds, all 4 hijackers were subdued, restrained with seatbelt straps and duct tape from the galley, and the weapons were secured in the cockpit. The plane descended rapidly. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, calm but urgent. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are making an emergency landing in Spokane. Law enforcement will meet us on the ground. Please remain seated and stay calm." Easton sank back into his seat, adrenaline still buzzing under his skin. His hands were steady, but his heart hammered against his ribs. Clara Jennings stood in the aisle, breathing hard, hair disheveled, blazer torn at the shoulder. She looked at him for a long moment, then walked down to row 8 and sat in the empty seat beside him. "You just saved my life," she said quietly. Easton shook his head. "You saved your own life. I just made sure you had the chance." She studied him, eyes sharp despite the chaos. "What's your name?" "Easton Brooks." "Thank you, Easton Brooks." He nodded once, then looked out the window at the darkened mountains below. Just did what needed doing. Clara didn't respond immediately, but as the plane began its descent, she didn't move from the seat beside him. And for reasons neither of them fully understood yet, that felt like the most important decision of the night. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The Spokane airport terminal was a blur of flashing lights and urgent voices. FBI agents and windbreakers moved through the gate area with practiced efficiency, separating passengers into groups, taking statements, documenting evidence. Paramedics checked vitals and handed out blankets to those still shaking from adrenaline. Easton sat in a hard plastic chair near gate C7, a styrofoam cup of terrible coffee cooling in his hand. He'd given his statement twice already, once to airport security and once to a federal's agent who looked barely old enough to rent a car. Now he just wanted to go home. Across the terminal, Clara Jennings stood surrounded by a different kind of chaos. 3 assistants had materialized seemingly out of nowhere, along with a lawyer in an expensive suit and a PR representative whispering urgently into her phone. Clara listened to them with the same focused calm she'd shown at 30,000 feet, nodding occasionally, answering questions in clipped sentences. But every few minutes, her eyes drifted across the terminal to where Easton sat alone. Finally, she excused herself from the cluster of people, walked across the polished floor, and stopped in front of him. "They're saying we'll be here another 2 hours minimum," she said. "Maybe longer." Easton nodded. "Figured as much. There's a lounge upstairs. Quieter, better coffee." She paused. "Would you join me?" He looked up at her, surprised. "You don't have to do that." "I know," Clara said, "but I'd like to." 5 minutes later, they sat in the executive lounge, away from the noise and the cameras. The space was almost empty. Just a businessman asleep on a leather couch in the corner and a flight attendant scrolling through her phone near the window. Clara poured 2 cups of coffee from the carafe, added cream to hers, and slid the other across the table to Easton. "Black?" she guessed. "Black's fine." They drank in silence for a moment. Outside, the first hints of dawn were beginning to soften the darkness. "I looked you up," Clara said finally. Easton raised an eyebrow. "That was fast." "I have people." She smiled faintly. "Easton Brooks, owner of Brooks Carpentry in Bellingham, specializes in custom furniture and home restoration. 1 daughter, age 9, widower." Easton's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "The internet knows a lot." "The internet knows facts," Clara said gently. "It doesn't know the story." He set down his cup. "What do you want to know?" "Whatever you want to tell me." Easton leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Why does it matter?" "Because," Clara said carefully, "you're the first person in 5 years who's helped me without wanting something in return. And I need to understand if that's real, or if I'm just reading the situation wrong." "It's real," Easton said simply. "I don't want anything." Clara absorbed that, then nodded. "Then let me start. My name is Clara Jennings. I run Next Gen Industries, which makes software for healthcare systems. We employ about 4,000 people. I inherited the company from my father when I was 28, and I've spent the last decade proving I deserved it." "Sounds exhausting," Easton said. "It is." She wrapped both hands around her mug. "My father built everything from nothing. He had this vision of technology that actually helped people instead of just extracting profit from them. When he died, the board tried to push me out. Said I was too young, too inexperienced, too emotional. But you Stayed. I fought, Clara corrected. And I won. But winning doesn't mean belonging. Most days I feel like I'm performing a role instead of living a life. Easton nodded slowly. I know that feeling. Clara looked at him. Tell me. He hesitated, then began. My wife, Anna, died 3 years ago. Cancer. She was 31. His voice was steady but quiet. We had Sophie when we were young, maybe too young. But Anna made it work. She made everything work. I'm sorry, Clara said softly. After she passed, I had to figure out how to be 2 parents at once. How to run a business, raise a daughter, and not completely fall apart. He paused. Some days I manage. Some days I don't. And tonight? Clara asked. What made you stand up? Easton thought about it. I've spent 3 years trying to make sure Sophie grows up knowing that good people still exist, that when something's wrong, you don't just sit there, you act. He met Clara's eyes. If I'd stayed in my seat, I couldn't have lived with that. Clara felt something shift in her chest. Not attraction, not yet, but recognition. The kind you feel when you meet someone who understands the weight you carry without needing to explain it. You're a good father, she said. I'm trying to be. They sat quietly for a while longer. The terminal began to stir with early morning travelers. Announcements echoed faintly through the walls. Finally, Clara spoke again. The FBI wants me to do a press conference. Talk about what happened, reassure the public, show strength. She smiled without humor. Standard crisis management. Will you? Probably. It's part of the job. She looked at him. But they also want to make you part of the story. The hero. The man who saved the CEO. Easton frowned. I don't want that. I know. That's why I'm telling you now. So you can disappear before the cameras arrive. He studied her. Why would you do that? Because you helped me without asking for credit, Clara said. And that's rare. I don't want to take it from you by turning you into a headline. Easton stood, picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. I appreciate that. Clara stood too. Easton. He paused. If I wanted to say thank you properly, not with press conferences or publicity, just human to human, would you let me? He looked at her for a long moment. You don't owe me anything, Clara. I know, she said. But maybe I want to anyway. Easton smiled, small but genuine. Then yeah, I'd let you. Clara reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. She flipped it over and wrote something on the back. My personal number, not the office line. Just me. He took the card, glanced at it, then slipped it into his pocket. Take care of yourself, Easton Brooks, Clara said. You too, Clara Jennings. He walked toward the exit, boots quiet on the carpet. Clara watched him go, something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. It felt like hope, but steadier, like foundation instead of fantasy. And for the first time in years, she wondered what it might be like to build something real. 3 days had passed since the hijacking. Easton stood in his workshop, the smell of fresh-cut cedar filling the air as sunlight streamed through the windows. He ran his hand along the smooth surface of a dining table he'd been building for a client in Ferndale, checking for imperfections, finding none. The rhythm of his work had always been meditative. Measure twice, cut once. Sand until your fingers know the grain. Build something that lasts. It was honest work, the kind that left you tired but satisfied at the end of the day. His phone buzzed on the workbench. He ignored it. It had been buzzing a lot lately. News outlets, curious neighbors, even a producer from some morning show wanting to tell his story. He declined them all politely, then started letting calls go to voicemail. But when the phone rang a 4th time, he glanced at the screen. Unknown number. He almost let it ring out. Then something made him answer. Hello? Easton? It's Clara. He straightened, surprised. Clara, hi. I hope I'm not interrupting. Just working. It's fine. There was a pause, then Clara's voice came through again, quieter this time. I wanted to call sooner, but things have been chaotic. Press, board meetings, damage control. You know how it is. Not really, Easton said with a small smile. But I can imagine. Clara laughed softly. Right. Different worlds. Another pause. Listen, I know this might sound strange, but I'm in Bellingham for work. There's a healthcare summit at the convention center and I'm speaking tomorrow. Okay. And I thought, since I'm here, maybe I could buy you that coffee I mentioned. Proper thank you. No cameras, no press, just coffee. Easton looked around his workshop at the half-finished table, the pile of sawdust in the corner, the to-do list tacked to the wall. He had a dozen reasons to say no. Work deadlines, errands to run, Sophie's school pickup in 3 hours. But instead, he said, there's a place called the Roasted Bean on Holly Street. Good coffee, quiet. Meet you there in 20? Perfect. The cafe was exactly as Easton had described it. Small, warm, filled with the rich aroma of espresso and fresh pastries. Local art hung on exposed brick walls. A handful of customers sat scattered at wooden tables, laptops open, conversations low. Clara arrived exactly on time, wearing jeans and a simple cream sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked different without the blazer and the entourage. Younger, more like someone you'd meet at a farmer's market than a boardroom. Easton stood when she entered. You found it. GPS works wonders. She smiled, then gestured to the counter. What's good here? Everything. But the maple latte is my daughter's favorite. Then I'll try that. They ordered, found a table near the window, and for a moment just sat, letting the comfort of normalcy settle between them. How have you been? Clara asked. Busy, dodging reporters mostly. I'm sorry about that. They're relentless. Easton shrugged. Not your fault. They'll move on to the next story soon enough. Clara sipped her latte, then nodded approvingly. Your daughter has good taste. Sophie has opinions about everything. Comes with being 9. Tell me about her. Easton leaned back, a genuine smile crossing his face. She's smart. Too smart sometimes. Asks questions I don't have answers for. Wants to be a marine biologist one day, a chef the next, then a detective who solves cold cases. He paused. She's got her mother's curiosity and stubbornness. Sounds like a good combination. Most days. His expression softened. She's the reason I do everything. The reason I keep showing up. Clara nodded slowly. My father used to say something similar. That the people we love are the architecture of our lives. Without them, we're just standing in empty rooms. That's beautiful, Easton said. He was a poet trapped in an engineer's body. Clara smiled sadly. I miss him every day. They talked for an hour, then 2. The conversation flowed easily, naturally, the way it does when 2 people stop performing and start being honest. Clara told him about growing up in her father's shadow, about the impossible standards she'd set for herself, about the loneliness that came with power. Easton told her about Anna, about the early years of building his business while raising Sophie, about the quiet moments that still caught him off guard, like finding one of Anna's hair ties in the couch cushions or hearing a song that used to make her dance in the kitchen. Do you ever feel guilty? Clara asked quietly. For moving forward? Easton thought about it. Sometimes, but I think Anna would be angrier if I stayed stuck. She wasn't that kind of person. That's wise. That's survival. Outside, the afternoon light began to soften. Clara checked her watch, then sighed. I should probably go. Dinner with the summit organizers. Sounds thrilling, Easton said dryly. She laughed. It's as exciting as it sounds. She stood, gathered her bag, then hesitated. Easton, would it be okay if I did this again sometime? Just talked, no agenda. He looked up at her, something shifting in his chest. Yeah, I'd like that. Clara smiled, the first truly unguarded smile he'd seen from her. Good. As she walked toward the door, she turned back. Oh, and Easton, bring Sophie next time. I'd love to meet her. He watched her leave, the door chiming softly as it closed. Then he sat back down, staring at his now cold coffee, and realized something that both excited and terrified him. He was starting to feel something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. Not just for Sophie, for himself. And he had no idea what to do with it. The morning started ordinary. Easton woke at 6, made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs for Sophie, drove her to Bellingham Bay Elementary, and returned home to finish the cedar table that had been demanding his attention all week. By noon, he was covered in sawdust, satisfied with his progress and thinking about lunch. That's when he heard it. The sound was unmistakable, deep, rhythmic, growing louder with each passing second. A helicopter. Easton stepped out of his workshop into the backyard, shielding his eyes against the midday sun. The noise intensified, echoing off the nearby trees. Then he saw it. A sleek black helicopter descending toward the open field behind his property. His neighbors, the Castellanos, appeared on their porch, phones already out, filming. Mrs. Chen from across the street stood frozen in her garden, trowel in hand, mouth open. The helicopter touched down gently, rotors still spinning, kicking up dust and dry grass. The side door slid open. Easton's heart pounded. His first thought was federal agents, some follow-up on the hijacking investigation. His second thought was that something had happened to Sophie. But then Clara Jennings stepped out. She wore a navy business suit, hair pulled back, sunglasses reflecting the sky. Behind her emerged 2 others, a man in a dark suit carrying a leather briefcase, and a woman with a tablet and an expression that suggested she managed very important schedules. Clara walked across the field toward him, her heels sinking slightly into the soft earth. She removed her sunglasses as she approached. Hi, she said, slightly breathless. Easton stared at her, then at the helicopter, then back at her. Clara, what is this? I know this looks dramatic. Dramatic? He gestured toward the aircraft. You landed a helicopter in my backyard. Technically, it's the field behind your backyard, she said with a small, apologetic smile. And I'm sorry. I should have called first. Yeah, you should have. Easton ran a hand through his hair, still processing. What's going on? Clara glanced back at her assistants, who had stopped a respectful distance away. Can we talk? Privately? Easton led her into his workshop, away from the growing crowd of curious neighbors. Inside, the smell of cedar and varnish felt grounding, normal, a sharp contrast to the surreal scene unfolding outside. Clara looked around the space, taking in the half-finished furniture, the organized chaos of tools, the photographs pinned to a corkboard near the workbench. One showed Sophie grinning with a missing front tooth. Another captured Anna mid-laugh, flower on her nose. You built all this? Clara asked, gesturing to the furniture. Most of it. It's beautiful. She ran her hand along the edge of the cedar table. You're really talented. Clara, Easton said gently but firmly. Why are you here? She turned to face him, took a breath, and the professional mask she wore so well began to slip. Because I owe you an explanation about who I really am and what this week has actually been about. I know who you are. You told me. I told you part of it. She folded her arms, not defensively, but like she was holding herself together. What I didn't tell you is that the hijacking wasn't random. Easton went very still. What do you mean? Those men, they weren't ordinary criminals. They were hired. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed the weight she carried. Hired to intimidate me, to send a message. What kind of message? Clara walked to the window, looking out at the helicopter. 6 months ago, Next Gen Industries uncovered something, a major security flaw in medical software used by hundreds of hospitals. Not our software, a competitor's. But because we found it, we reported it. Legally, we had to. Easton listened, his carpenter's mind already building the framework of where this was going. The company that made the flawed software, they're worth billions. Reporting the flaw meant lawsuits, regulatory investigations, loss of contracts. They blamed us for their failure. She turned back to him. 3 weeks ago, I started receiving threats. My security team said they were credible. The FBI opened an investigation. And the hijacking? My security believes it was a coordinated intimidation attempt. Scare me into silence. Show me they could reach me anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. Her jaw tightened. What they didn't count on was you. Easton processed this slowly. So, when you came to Bellingham for coffee, that wasn't random either. No, Clara admitted quietly. I came because I needed to see you again. To thank you, yes. But also because you're the first person in years who didn't want something from me. Who saw me as a person, not a resource. But you didn't tell me the truth? I couldn't. Not without putting you at risk. She stepped closer. Easton, the people behind this, they're powerful, vindictive. If they knew you were important to me, if they thought they could use you as leverage, you'd be in danger. Sophie would be in danger. His expression hardened. Don't bring my daughter into this. I'm not. That's exactly why I'm here. Clara's voice cracked slightly, the first real emotion breaking through. I'm leaving. Going back to Seattle, to corporate headquarters where I have full security. I can't come back to Bellingham, can't see you again, because staying in your life puts you in the crosshairs, and I won't do that. Easton stared at her. So, this is goodbye. This is me keeping you safe. I didn't ask for that. I know. Clara reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. But I need you to have this anyway. Easton didn't take it immediately. What is it? A letter, an explanation, and something else. She placed it on the workbench between them. Read it after I leave, please. Clara, I don't need your money. It's not money. Her eyes met his, raw and honest. It's an opportunity, a choice. Read it, think about it, and then decide what you want. Outside, the helicopter's rotors began to spin faster, preparing for departure. I have to go, Clara said softly. Easton wanted to argue, to tell her this was absurd, that she didn't get to helicopter into his life and then disappear with cryptic letters and vague warnings. But he also saw the fear in her eyes, the genuine concern, the sacrifice she thought she was making. Take care of yourself, he said finally. Clara nodded, blinking rapidly. You too. She walked toward the door, paused, then turned back. For what it's worth, these last few days, the conversations, the coffee, getting to know you and hearing about Sophie, it was the most real I've felt in years. Clara. She waited. If things were different, Easton said quietly. If you weren't who you are and I wasn't who I am, if this whole situation was just two normal people meeting, I think I'd want to know where it could go. Something broke behind her eyes. Me too. Then she was gone, walking across the field, climbing back into the helicopter. The door slid shut. The aircraft lifted smoothly into the air, hovered for a moment, then banked west toward Seattle. Easton stood in his driveway, watching until it disappeared into the clouds. Mrs. Chen appeared at his fence. Easton, was that Clara Jennings, the CEO? He nodded absently. Oh my goodness, are you two dating? Easton didn't answer. He walked back into his workshop, closed the door, and stood staring at the envelope on his workbench. The letter felt heavy. Not physically, but in the way objects sometimes carry weight beyond their material. He picked it up slowly, turned it over. His name was written on the front in Clara's precise handwriting. He didn't open it yet. Instead, he sat down on his work stool, envelope in hand, and let himself feel everything he'd been holding back since the moment that helicopter had appeared. Confusion, frustration, loss. And underneath it all, the faint, stubborn pulse of something that felt dangerously close to heartbreak. Outside, Sophie would be getting out of school in 2 hours. He'd pick her up, make dinner, help with homework, tuck her into bed. Life would continue, normal and predictable and safe. But the envelope sat on his workbench like a door he couldn't quite bring himself to walk through. Not yet. Evening settled over Bellingham with that particular softness that comes in early autumn. Easton sat on his back porch, Sophie asleep inside after a long story about dolphins and ocean explorers. The envelope rested on the wooden armrest beside him, still unopened. He'd avoided it all afternoon. Picked Sophie up from school, listened to her talk about the science project on ecosystems, made spaghetti with too much garlic the way she liked it. Normal routines, safe routines. But now, in the quiet, with only the crickets and distant sound of the bay for company, he couldn't avoid it anymore. Easton picked up the envelope, ran his thumb under the seal, and pulled out 2 items. A handwritten letter on cream-colored stationery and a business proposal, professionally bound. He started with the letter. Easton, I don't know how to write this without sounding like I'm trying to buy your forgiveness or your understanding, so I'll just be honest. When I met you on that plane, in the middle of chaos and fear, you showed me something I'd forgotten existed. Decency without calculation. You helped because it was right, not because it would benefit you. In my world, that's rarer than you'd think. These past few days, talking with you, learning about your life, hearing the way you speak about Sophie and Anna, I remembered what it feels like to be seen as a person instead of a position. You didn't treat me like a CEO or a problem to solve. You treated me like someone worth knowing. That's a gift I didn't realize I needed until I had it. The truth is, I'm terrified. Not of the threats or the corporate warfare or even the people who want to intimidate me into silence. I'm terrified of what it means to care about someone when caring puts them at risk. I've spent years building walls to protect myself, and in 1 week, you walked right through them without even trying. So I'm leaving because staying is selfish. Because if something happened to you or Sophie because of me, I couldn't live with that. But I'm also leaving you with something. Not charity, not guilt, but an opportunity that I genuinely believe could change your life the way you've already changed mine. The attached proposal is real. It's not a fantasy or a consolation prize. It's a door, and you get to decide if you walk through it. Whatever you choose, know that meeting you mattered. Know that you reminded me why I started NextGen in the first place. To build things that help people. You build things that last, things with purpose and care. Maybe we're not so different after all. With gratitude and something I can't quite name yet, Clara Easton read it twice, then set it down and opened the business proposal. The cover page was simple. Brooks Craftsmanship Center, a community woodworking initiative. He turned the page. The proposal outlined a fully funded community workshop in Bellingham, designed to teach woodworking skills to underserved populations, veterans, at-risk young people, and anyone seeking to learn a trade. The building, an old warehouse on Samish Way, had already been purchased. Renovation plans were attached. Equipment lists, curriculum suggestions, partnership opportunities with local schools and social service organizations. At the bottom of the funding page, one line stood out. Primary benefactor, the Jennings Foundation. Endowment, $2.5 million over 5 years. Easton stared at the number until it stopped looking like currency and started looking like possibility. His phone rang. He almost ignored it, but the screen showed a Seattle area code he recognized now. Clara? I know I said I wouldn't call, she said quietly, but I couldn't not call. Did you open it? I'm reading it now. And? Easton looked out at his backyard, at the workshop he'd built with his own hands, at the life he'd constructed carefully and protectively after Anna died. Why would you do this? Because you told me about your dream, Clara said. That day at the coffee shop, you mentioned wanting to teach Sophie's generation how to build things with their hands, how to create instead of just consume. You said it half joking, but I could tell you meant it. Clara, this is not a small gesture. I know. This is $2.5 million. I'm aware of the math, she said with a hint of a smile in her voice. Easton, NextGen makes software. We build products that exist in computers and clouds. But what you do, you make things people can touch. Things that last beyond the next software update. That matters. Teaching people those skills, giving them purpose and pride and a way forward. That matters even more. Easton ran his hand over his face. And you expect what in return? Nothing. Her voice was firm. I expect nothing. If you take this opportunity, it's yours. You run it. You design the curriculum. You choose who teaches and who learns. The foundation provides funding and administrative support if you want it. That's all. That's not all, Easton said quietly. This ties me to you, to your world. A pause. Does that scare you? Yes. Why? He stood, paced to the edge of the porch. Because I've built a simple life, Clara. A safe life. Sophie's happy, I'm steady, we have routines and predictability. What you're offering, it's beautiful and generous and completely terrifying because it changes everything. It doesn't have to, Clara said softly. You can say no. Throw the proposal away. Forget the helicopter and the letter and all of it. Go back to your workshop and your quiet life. I'll understand. Will you? No, she admitted, but I'll respect it. Easton closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the choice pressing down on him. Can I think about it? Of course. Take all the time you need. Clara? Yeah? Why does this feel like it's about more than a woodworking center? A long silence stretched between them. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because it is. Because I'm hoping that if you say yes to the opportunity, maybe eventually you'll say yes to the possibility of something more. Not now, not while things are complicated, but someday when the dust settles and it's safe. That's a lot of maybes. I know. Easton opened his eyes. looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "I'll call you in a few days." "Okay." "And Clara, thank you for seeing something in me I'm not sure I see in myself." "That's what people do when they care," she said gently. "They see what you're too close to notice." After they hung up, Easton sat back down and reread the proposal, this time seeing past the numbers and logistics to the vision underneath. A place where people could rebuild themselves through the dignity of craft, where hands that had known hardship could know creation. It was Anna's kind of dream, bold and hopeful and rooted in the belief that people were worth investing in. And somewhere between the second and third reading, Easton realized his answer had already formed. He just needed the courage to say yes. 3 days later, Easton stood in front of the warehouse on Samish Way. The building was exactly as described in the proposal. Solid bones, good light, plenty of space. It needed work, but that had never scared him. He knew how to take something broken and make it whole. Sophie stood beside him, backpack slung over one shoulder, having insisted on coming along after school. She tilted her head, studying the structure with serious consideration. "It's big," she said finally. "It is? Bigger than your workshop?" "Much bigger." She looked up at him. "Are you going to do it?" Easton crouched down to her level. "What do you think I should do?" Sophie bit her lip, the way she always did when thinking hard about something. "Miss Clara is the one who sent the helicopter, right?" "She is." "And she wants to give you this building to teach people woodworking?" "Basically, yes." Sophie nodded slowly. "Does she want to be your friend?" Easton felt something catch in his chest. "I think so. Maybe more than friends eventually. Like how you and Mama were." "Different," Easton said carefully. "Nobody will ever be like Mama. But maybe something new. Something good." Sophie reached out and took his hand, her small fingers wrapping around his larger ones. "Mama used to say that scared and excited feel the same in your tummy. You just have to decide which one you're going to listen to." Easton felt his throat tighten. "She did say that, didn't she? So, which one are you listening to?" He looked at his daughter, this wise, beautiful person who carried so much of Anna in her expressions and her heart. "I'm trying to listen to the excited part." "Then I think you should do it," Sophie said matter-of-factly. "Because teaching people stuff is good. And maybe Miss Clara can come visit sometimes, and you won't be lonely anymore." "I'm not lonely, sweetheart. I have you." Sophie squeezed his hand. "I know. But sometimes when you think I'm not looking, you get sad. Maybe Miss Clara makes you less sad." Out of the mouths of 9-year-olds, Easton thought. Truth delivered with devastating clarity. That evening, after Sophie was asleep, Easton called Clara. She answered on the first ring. "Hi. I want to say yes," Easton said without preamble. "But I need you to understand something first." "Okay. If I do this, if I take this opportunity and build this center, it's not because I'm hoping it leads to something between us. It's because the idea itself is worth doing. Because the work matters." "I understand. But," Easton continued, "I'd be lying if I said I didn't hope we could find a way to make the other part work too. Eventually, when it's safe." He heard her exhale, a sound caught between relief and something deeper. "So that's a yes?" "That's a yes to the center, and a maybe to the rest. A maybe I'd like to explore when the timing's right." "I'll take it," Clara said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "When can you start?" "I need to finish my current projects first. Give my existing clients what I promised them. But after that, He looked at the proposal spread out on his kitchen table. After that, I'm all in. They talked for another hour, discussing logistics and timelines, but also other things. Sophie's latest obsession with sea creatures, Clara's upcoming testimony before a congressional committee about software security. The mundane and the extraordinary woven together like the beginning of something neither of them could quite name yet. 2 weeks later, Easton stood in the warehouse again, but this time with a contractor, an architect, and a very detailed renovation plan. The space was starting to take shape in his mind, workbenches along the east wall, tool storage on the west, a classroom area near the front windows where natural light would pour in. His phone buzzed. A text from Clara. Just finished the hearing. Going well. How's the warehouse? He smiled and typed back. Taking shape. You should see it. 3 dots appeared then. I'd like that. Maybe next month when things calm down? Easton hesitated, then wrote, Sophie wants to meet you properly. Not in a helicopter emergency situation, just coffee and conversation. The response came quickly. I'd love that more than you know. That night, tucking Sophie into bed, she asked, Is Miss Clara coming to visit? Maybe soon. Good. Sophie yawned, pulling her dolphin blanket up to her chin. I want to make sure she's nice enough for you. Easton laughed softly. I think that's supposed to be my job. We can both do it, Sophie said sleepily. It's better when there's 2 people checking. As Easton turned off the light and closed the door, he stood in the hallway for a moment, letting himself feel the full weight of what was beginning. Fear, yes, but also excitement. The kind that Anna had always said felt the same in your stomach. You just had to decide which one to listen to. He was choosing excitement. And for the first time since Anna died, that choice didn't feel like a betrayal. It felt like honoring everything she'd taught him about living fully, about taking chances, about building something beautiful out of whatever materials life handed you, even if those materials arrived in a helicopter. 6 weeks later, the Brooks Craftsmanship Center was beginning to look less like an abandoned warehouse and more like a vision taking form. The scent of fresh lumber mixed with paint and varnish hung in the air. Sunlight streamed through the newly installed skylights, casting geometric patterns across the concrete floor that would soon be sealed and polished. Easton stood in the center of the space, blueprint in hand, directing a small crew of contractors and volunteers. His voice carried across the open floor with quiet authority as he explained the placement of each workstation, the flow of the space, the importance of natural light for detailed carpentry work. The sanding stations go here, he said, pointing to the western wall. We want the dust collection system vented properly so nobody's breathing sawdust all day. And the finishing room needs to be completely separate, sealed off with proper ventilation. Tom Garza, the contractor he'd hired, nodded approvingly. You've thought this through. I've had time, Easton replied, and motivation. What he didn't say was that he'd been working on this vision for years, long before Clara had put resources behind it. Late nights sketching layouts after Sophie went to bed. Conversations with Anna about someday teaching others what his grandfather had taught him. Dreams deferred but never abandoned. Now those dreams were becoming 3-dimensional. The front door opened, bringing with it the crisp October air and the sound of footsteps. Easton looked up and felt his heart do something complicated in his chest. Clara walked in wearing jeans, work boots, and a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. No makeup, no corporate armor, just Clara. You came, Easton said, unable to keep the surprise from his voice. I said I would. She smiled, looking around the space with genuine wonder. Easton, this is incredible. You've done all this in 6 weeks? Had help? He gestured to the crew scattered throughout the building, and a very detailed plan. Clara walked slowly through the space, taking in the partially constructed workbenches, the tool wall being framed out, the classroom area with its whiteboard and seating arrangement. She ran her hand along a piece of finished maple, feeling the smoothness of the grain. You can see it, can't you? She said quietly. What it's going to become. Every detail, Easton confirmed. The sound of sanders running, the smell of fresh-cut wood, people learning that their hands can create something valuable. Clara turned to face him. This is going to change lives. That's the idea. For a moment they just stood there, the noise of construction fading into background as something unspoken passed between them. It had been 2 months since the helicopter had landed in his backyard. 2 months of phone calls that stretched late into the evening. 2 months of text messages about everything from renovation challenges to Sophie's science fair project to Clara's congressional testimony that had led to major reforms in medical software oversight. 2 months of something building that neither of them had quite named yet. Daddy. Sophie's voice rang out from the entrance. She burst through the door, backpack bouncing, followed by Easton's neighbor Patricia, who'd picked her up from school. Oh wow, it looked so different from last week. Sophie stopped short when she saw Clara, her eyes going wide. You're Miss Clara, the helicopter lady. Clara laughed, a genuine sound that made something warm bloom in Easton's chest. I am, though I promise I don't always arrive by helicopter. Sometimes I use normal cars like regular people. Sophie walked closer, studying Clara with the unfiltered assessment only 9-year-olds can manage. Are you here to see the wood shop? I am. Your dad's building something really special. I know. He talks about it all the time. Sophie glanced between them, something knowing in her expression that was far too mature for her age. Do you want to see my favorite part? Daddy's building a special kids station so young people can learn too. I'd love to see that, Clara said warmly. Sophie grabbed Clara's hand without hesitation and pulled her toward the back corner where Easton had designed a scaled-down work area with adjustable height benches and age-appropriate tools. As they walked away, Sophie's voice carried back, chattering about her own woodworking project, a birdhouse she was making for the backyard. Easton watched them go, something shifting fundamentally in his chest. The sight of Sophie comfortable with Clara, the easy way they moved together, it felt significant in a way he couldn't quite articulate. Patricia appeared at his elbow, a knowing smile on her face. That's her, isn't it? The one you've been talking to every night after Sophie goes to bed? Easton felt heat creep up his neck. I haven't been that obvious. You've been smiling at your phone for 2 months straight. Trust me, it's obvious. Patricia patted his arm. She seems lovely, and Sophie clearly approves. It's complicated. The good things usually are. That evening, after the contractors had left, and the space had grown quiet, the three of them sat on the floor of what would become the classroom area, sharing pizza from the box Easton had ordered. Sophie sat between them, tomato sauce on her chin, enthusiastically explaining her vision for the birdhouse. And I want to paint it blue, she said, because blue jays are my favorite. But Daddy says I should stain it instead so the wood shows through. Clara considered this seriously. What if you did both? Stain the main house so you can see the wood grain, but paint the trim blue as an accent? Sophie's eyes lit up. That's perfect. Can I do that, Daddy? Easton smiled. That's actually a great compromise. We'll work on it this weekend. Sophie beamed at Clara. "You're really smart about building things." "I just know how to listen to what people want and help them figure out how to make it happen," Clara said. "That's most of what I do at my job, actually." "What is your job exactly?" Sophie asked, with the blunt curiosity of someone who genuinely wanted to know. "Daddy says you run a big company, but what does that mean?" Clara thought for a moment, then said, "You know how, when you go to the doctor, they have computers that keep track of your information, your allergies, your medicines, when you had your last checkup?" Sophie nodded. "My company makes the software that helps those computers work properly and keep your information safe. We make sure doctors have the tools they need to take care of people." "So, you help doctors help people?" Sophie summarized. "Exactly." "That's a good job," Sophie declared. "Helping people is important." Clara glanced at Easton over Sophie's head, something tender in her expression. "Your dad taught me that." Later, after Sophie had fallen asleep in the car on the way home, and Easton had carried her inside, he returned to find Clara still at the center, standing at the window, looking out at the street lights of Bellingham flickering to life. "Thank you for coming today," he said quietly, joining her at the window. "It meant a lot." "Thank you for inviting me into this part of your life," Clara replied. "Into Sophie's life." "I know that wasn't a small thing." "No, it wasn't." Easton turned to face her. "But it felt right. She's been asking about you constantly. I think she's been more excited about this place partly because she knows you're connected to it." Clara smiled. "She's remarkable, Easton. So smart and kind and confident. You're raising an incredible human." "I'm trying." He paused, then added, "Anna would have loved this place. She always said the world needed more spaces where people could make things with their hands, where the work itself was the reward." "She sounds like she was an amazing person." "She was. And I think," Easton said carefully, "she'd also be glad that I'm not trying to preserve her memory by staying frozen, that I'm letting myself move forward." Clara's breath caught slightly. "Is that what this is? Moving forward?" "I think so." Slowly, carefully, but yes. They stood in comfortable silence, the space around them full of possibility, both the literal possibility of the center taking shape and the quieter, more personal possibility growing between them. "The grand opening is scheduled for 3 weeks from now," Easton said. "I was hoping you'd be there, not as the benefactor making a speech, just as Clara, if you want to." "I want to," she said immediately. "I wouldn't miss it." "And maybe," Easton added, feeling brave, "you could stay for the weekend after. There's a harvest festival downtown that Sophie's been wanting to go to. Nothing fancy, just carnival games and apple cider. But it might be nice." Clara turned to face him fully, her eyes searching his. "Are you asking me on a date, Easton Brooks, with your daughter as a chaperone?" He smiled. "I guess I am. Is that weird?" "No," Clara said softly. "It's perfect. It's real. That's what I want." As she left that night, driving away in a rental car instead of being whisked off in a helicopter, Easton stood in the doorway of the center and felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Not just hope, but certainty. The kind that settles into your bones and says, "This is right. This is worth it. This is the beginning of something real." And for once, he didn't question it. He just let himself feel it. The article appeared on a Tuesday morning, 3 days before the Brooks Craftsmanship Center was set to open. Easton was having coffee when his phone started buzzing with notifications. Text messages from friends, missed calls from unknown numbers, email alerts from Google tracking his name. He opened the first link with growing dread. The headline read, "Billionaire CEO's secret relationship with plane hero raises questions about motive behind $2.5 million donation." Below it was a photo, Clara and him at the center, taken through the window. The angle made it look intimate, conspiratorial. The caption suggested impropriety. A wealthy woman buying affection, a working-class man taking advantage of a vulnerable benefactor. The article was worse. It questioned everything: Clara's judgment, his intentions, whether the community center was legitimate or just an elaborate cover for a questionable relationship. It quoted anonymous sources, claiming Easton had sought Clara out after the hijacking, that he'd positioned himself as a hero to gain access to her wealth. None of it was true. All of it was damaging. Easton's phone rang. "Clara." "Have you seen it?" she asked, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Just read it." "It's character assassination. Pure fiction dressed up as journalism." He could hear her pacing, heels clicking on a hard floor. "My legal team is already drafting a response. We can sue for defamation, force a retraction, make them pay for printing lies." "Clara, wait." "Wait for what? For them to destroy what we've built? To make people question whether this center is legitimate? If you respond aggressively, it becomes a bigger story," Easton said quietly. "It looks like you're trying to silence criticism. The headlines become about the lawsuit, not the truth." Clara went silent. Then, "So what do we do?" "We ignore it. We open the center as planned. We let the work speak for itself." "And if people believe the article? If they think you're some kind of opportunist?" Easton looked out his kitchen window at Sophie playing in the backyard, oblivious to the storm brewing online. "Then I live with that. I've lived through worse." But living with it proved harder than he anticipated. By afternoon, the story had been picked up by regional news outlets. By evening, reporters were calling the center, his home number, even showing up at Sophie's school. Patricia texted him a warning that news vans were parked on their street. At the hardware store, conversation stopped when he walked in. At Sophie's parent-teacher conference that evening, other parents whispered behind hands. Even the teacher, Mrs. Morrison, gave him a look that suggested she'd seen the article and had questions. "Is everything okay at home, Mr. Brooks?" she asked carefully. "Sophie's been so excited about the center, but given the recent news coverage, I wanted to make sure there wasn't anything we should be aware of." Easton kept his voice level. "Everything's fine. The news got some things wrong. That happens." But Sophie noticed. That night at dinner, pushing pasta around her plate, she said quietly, "Madison's mom said you're dating a rich lady, so she'll give you money." Easton's fork paused midair. "Madison's mom said that?" "She was talking to another mom at pickup. I heard them." Sophie looked up at him with worried eyes. "Is that true?" He set down his fork and pulled his chair closer to hers. "Sophie, listen to me. Miss Clara and I are friends. We care about each other. The center exists because she believes in the work, not because of anything else. Sometimes people make up stories when they don't understand something. But why would they make up mean stories?" "Because," Easton said carefully, "sometimes when good things happen to regular people, other people look for reasons why it can't be real. They can't imagine someone just being generous or kind without a secret reason." Sophie considered this. "That's sad." "It is," Easton agreed. "But we know the truth. That's what matters." He wished he believed that as strongly as he said it. The breaking point came 2 days before the opening. Easton arrived at the center to find graffiti spray painted across the front wall. Gold digger in harsh red letters. Below it, fake hero. He stood staring at the words, feeling something cold and hard settle in his stomach. This wasn't just gossip anymore. This was targeted, personal. He was photographing the damage for the police report when Clara's car pulled up. She got out, saw the graffiti, and went pale. "Easton, I'm so sorry. Not your fault." "It absolutely is," she said, voice shaking with anger. "This is happening because of me. Because I couldn't keep my distance, couldn't just write a check and walk away like I was supposed to. I didn't want you to walk away. But maybe you should have." Clara's composure cracked. "Look at what this is doing to you, to Sophie, to everything you've built here. People are questioning your integrity, vandalizing your property, making your daughter feel unsafe." Easton turned to face her fully. "So what are you saying? That we should end this? Pretend we don't care about each other to make other people comfortable?" "I'm saying maybe I was selfish," Clara said, blinking back tears. "Maybe I wanted this. Wanted you so badly that I didn't think about the cost." "The cost is people being cruel," Easton said firmly. "That's on them, not us. But I have the resources to protect myself from that cruelty. You don't. Sophie doesn't." Clara's voice broke. "What if it gets worse? What if someone does more than just paint walls?" Easton stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "Clara, look at me." He waited until her eyes met his. "I knew what I was signing up for when I said yes to this. I knew dating someone like you would come with attention and scrutiny. I chose it anyway because what we have, what we're building, it's worth fighting for." "Is it?" she whispered. "Is it worth Sophie hearing terrible things about her father? Is it worth your reputation in this community?" "Yes," Easton said without hesitation. "Because Sophie is learning that you don't abandon people when things get hard. That you stand up for what's real even when it's uncomfortable. Those are lessons worth any amount of gossip." Clara searched his face. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." She exhaled slowly, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "Then we need a plan, because I'm not going to let them tear you down without a fight." "I thought you said responding would make it worse." "Responding with lawyers would make it worse," Clara corrected. "Responding with truth is different." She pulled out her phone. "The opening is in 2 days. What if instead of hiding from the story, we walk straight into it? Give one interview together and tell the real story. No spin, no corporate messaging, just honesty." Easton considered this. "You think that'll work?" "I think people respond to authenticity, and we have something most public figures don't. A genuine story." She squeezed his hands. "Will you trust me?" He looked at her, at the determination in her eyes, at the woman who'd flown into his life and refused to fly back out when things got complicated. "Yeah," he said. "I trust you." The next morning, they sat down with a reporter from the Bellingham Herald, a respected local journalist named Catherine Wright, who'd requested an interview. They met at the center, surrounded by the workbenches and tools that represented everything they'd built together. Catherine asked hard questions about the timing of their relationship, about the size of the donation, about whether Easton had sought Clara out after the hijacking. They answered with complete honesty. Clara explained the threats that had preceded the hijacking, the fear that had driven her decisions, the moment she'd realized Easton represented something she'd been missing. Authentic human connection. Easton talked about his initial resistance, his concerns about accepting the donation, the way Sophie's wisdom had helped him see that turning down help out of pride wasn't strength. It was fear. "So you're together?" Catherine asked directly. This is a romantic relationship. Clara and Easton looked at each other. A moment of silent communication passed between them. We're figuring it out, Easton said carefully. Learning what it means to build something when our lives are so different. But yes, we care about each other deeply. And the center? Catherine pressed. Is that part of the relationship or separate from it? The center stands on its own, Clara said firmly. The funding is through the Jennings Foundation, with full oversight and accountability. Whether Easton and I work out personally or not, this center will continue to serve this community. That's in writing, legally binding. Catherine studied them both, then set down her recorder. Off the record, I've been a journalist for 20 years. I've seen opportunists and I've seen genuine people. You two are the real thing. I just hope the public can see that too. The article ran the next morning, the day of the grand opening. The headline was simple: Building Something Real. How a hijacking led to hope for Bellingham's community. It was fair, balanced, and most importantly, true. That afternoon, as people began arriving for the opening ceremony, Easton stood at the entrance wondering if anyone would show. Then they came. Not just a few people, but dozens. Tom Garza and his construction crew, Patricia with a homemade banner, Sophie's teacher Mrs. Morrison with several other educators, people from the community who'd read both articles and chose to believe in the work instead of the gossip. And when Clara stepped up to speak, not as a CEO but as someone who believed in second chances and the power of craftsmanship, the crowd listened. Standing beside her, Sophie's hand in his, Easton realized something important. The storm hadn't destroyed what they were building. It had tested it, proven it was built on something solid enough to withstand pressure. They'd survived the scrutiny. Now they got to do the real work. 3 weeks after the opening, on a quiet Sunday evening when the center was closed and Sophie was sleeping over at Patricia's house, Easton and Clara sat on the floor of the completed workshop. Around them, the space hummed with potential. Workbenches gleaming under soft overhead lights, tools organized and ready, the smell of wood and possibility filling the air. They'd just finished installing the last piece, a hand-carved sign above the main entrance that read, "Build with purpose, create with heart." "It's done," Clara said softly, looking around. "Actually, really done." "It is," Easton agreed. "Tomorrow we start classes. 6 students in the morning session, 8 in the afternoon." "Are you nervous?" "Terrified," he admitted with a small laugh. "What if I'm terrible at teaching? What if nobody learns anything?" Clara turned to face him. "You'll be amazing. You already are. I've watched you with Sophie, the way you explain things, the patience you have. These people are lucky to learn from you." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Clara said, "Can I tell you something?" "Always." "These past few months, building this place with you, watching it come to life, it's been the most fulfilling work I've done in years." Her voice was quiet but intense. "At NextGen, I'm 3 layers removed from the actual impact. I approve budgets and review reports, but I don't see the faces of the people our software helps. Here, I got to see every beam raised, every workbench built. I got to watch something transform from concept to reality." "You could do this kind of work anytime," Easton said. "You have the resources." "But I didn't have the inspiration," Clara said, looking at him. "Or the courage. You showed me that impact doesn't have to happen at scale to matter. Sometimes it's about 14 students and 1 workshop and the ripple effect that creates." Easton felt something shift in his chest, a door opening that he'd kept carefully locked since Anna died. Clara, I need to tell you something too. She waited, her full attention on him. When Anna died, I promised myself I'd never let anyone get that close again. That losing her had nearly destroyed me, and I couldn't risk feeling that kind of pain a second time. He paused, gathering courage. But these months with you, I've realized something. Closing myself off wasn't protecting me. It was just a different kind of death, a slower one. Clara's eyes glistened. Easton, I'm scared too. Every relationship I've had has been transactional. People wanted access or money or status. I've never known how to be with someone who just wants me. Her voice cracked slightly. What if I'm bad at this? What if I don't know how to be in a real relationship? Then we figure it out together, Easton said, taking her hand. No scripts, no expectations, just honesty and patience and showing up even when it's hard. I'm not good at the when it's hard part, Clara admitted. I'm used to fixing problems with resources and strategy. But relationships don't work that way. No, Easton agreed. They work with presence, with listening, with choosing each other, even when it would be easier to walk away. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. I don't want to walk away. Neither do I. They sat like that for a long time, the weight of unspoken feeling settling into something solid between them. Then Clara lifted her head and looked at him with an intensity that made his breath catch. I'm falling for you, she said simply. Completely, terrifyingly, inconveniently falling for you. And I need you to know that before this goes any further. Easton's heart hammered in his chest. Clara, I have a 9-year-old daughter who comes first, always. I have a modest life and a workshop full of sawdust. I can't give you galas and private jets and the kind of lifestyle you're used to. I don't want that, Clara said fiercely. I want Sunday mornings with terrible pancakes and Sophie's endless questions. I want to help you teach woodworking classes and hear about your day and fall asleep on your couch watching movies we've both seen before. I want the life you're living, if you'll let me be part of it. Easton cupped her face in his hands. These hands that knew how to build and shape and create. I'm falling for you too. Have been since that night on the plane when you refused to be scared even though you had every right to be. Since that morning in Spokane when you gave me an out and I didn't take it. Since every phone call and text message and moment you chose to show up even when it was complicated. So what do we do now? Clara whispered. Now, Easton said, leaning closer, we stop overthinking and start being. He kissed her then, gentle at first, then deeper as 3 months of careful distance dissolved into something honest and present and real. It wasn't the dramatic kiss of movies or romance novels. It was better than that. It was the kiss of two people who'd taken the time to know each other, who'd built trust slowly and deliberately, who understood that love wasn't a lightning bolt, but a choice made daily. When they finally pulled apart, Clara was smiling through tears. That was worth waiting for. Yeah, Easton agreed, his voice rough with emotion. It really was. They stayed at the center until nearly midnight, talking about everything they'd been holding back. Clara told him about the pressure she felt to be perfect, to never show weakness, to carry the weight of thousands of employees' livelihoods on her shoulders. Easton told her about the guilt he sometimes felt when he was happy, as if joy was a betrayal of Anna's memory. She wouldn't want that for you, Clara said gently. From everything you've told me about her, Anna sounds like someone who celebrated life. She was, Easton said. She used to say that grief and love weren't opposites. that you could hold both at the same time and honor both. I'm trying to learn that. How's that going? He looked at Clara, at the woman who'd flown into his life and refused to fly back out. Better now. The next morning, Easton woke to find a text from Clara sent at 3 a.m. when she apparently couldn't sleep. Thank you for last night, for your honesty, for being patient with my mess. I know I'm not easy, but I promise I'm trying. I care about you and Sophie more than I know how to say. Sleep well. See, he smiled and wrote back, you're worth the complexity. See you Thursday for Sophie's birdhouse unveiling. She's making you be the guest of honor. Fair warning, there will be speeches. 3 dots appeared immediately. I love that kid. And I'm falling in love with her dad. Too soon to say that? Easton's breath caught. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then he typed, not too soon? I'm right there with you. When Sophie came downstairs for breakfast, she found her father making heart-shaped pancakes, something he hadn't done since before Anna got sick. Why are you smiling like that? She asked suspiciously. Just happy, Easton said. Is it because of Miss Clara? Partly. Sophie climbed onto her chair, studying him with that too wise expression. Are you going to marry her? Easton flipped a pancake, buying time. That's a pretty big jump from where we are now. But you want to, right? Eventually? He turned to face his daughter. Maybe, someday, if she wants that too. Would that be okay with you? Sophie thought about it seriously, syrup bottle in hand. I think Mama would like her. Miss Clara builds things and helps people just like Mama did, just in different ways. Easton felt his throat tighten. Yeah, sweetheart, I think Mama would like her too. Then it's okay with me, Sophie declared. But she has to learn how to make pancakes better. Yours are still lumpy. Easton laughed, the sound genuine and full. Deal. I'll add that to the relationship requirements. As they ate breakfast together, sunlight streaming through the windows of their small kitchen, Easton realized something profound. He'd spent 3 years trying to protect his heart from breaking again. But in doing so, he'd also protected it from healing. Clara hadn't fixed him. Healing didn't work that way. But she'd shown him that opening up again was possible. That love after loss wasn't a betrayal, but a testament to the capacity of the human heart to rebuild itself. Just like the furniture in his workshop. You take broken pieces, sand them smooth, and create something new. Something different from what came before, but no less beautiful. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, someone comes along who knows how to hold those pieces gently while you figure out how they fit together. Clara Jennings was that person for him, and he was finally ready to let her in completely. 2 years later, the Brooks Craftsmanship Center stood as a testament to what happens when vision meets commitment. The building that had once been a forgotten warehouse now buzzed with life 6 days a week. The sound of sanders humming, saws cutting through wood, and voices calling out measurements created a symphony of purposeful creation. Easton stood at the front window, watching the morning class filter in. There was Marcus Chen, a veteran who'd arrived 18 months ago, unable to hold a conversation without his hands shaking. Now he taught the advanced joinery class, with steady precision and quiet pride. Beside him walked Teresa Oakes, a single mother who'd started as a student and now ran the youth weekend program, her daughter in the kids' class, learning alongside Sophie. The transformation wasn't just in the building or the programs. It was in the people. The center had served over 300 students in 2 years. 12 had started their own small woodworking businesses. 23 had found full-time employment in construction and furniture making. Countless others had simply found community, purpose, and the satisfaction of creating something beautiful with their hands. But the numbers didn't tell the whole story. The story lived in moments like watching Ray, who'd struggled with severe anxiety, patiently teaching a teenager how to sand with a grain. Or hearing Tom Garza laugh with students about the time he'd accidentally built a table leg a quarter-inch too short, and learned that mistakes were just lessons in disguise. The front door opened. Clara walked in, carrying 2 coffee cups and a brown paper bag that smelled like fresh muffins from the bakery down the street. She wore jeans and one of Easton's old flannel shirts, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. No one who saw her here would guess she'd just come from a board meeting conducted via video call from Easton's home office. "Morning," she said, handing him a coffee. "Sophie's already in the back with Teresa, working on that bookshelf for her room." Easton smiled. "She's determined to finish it before school starts next week." "She gets that determination from both her parents," Clara said, leaning against him comfortably. They'd moved in together 6 months ago, a decision that had felt both monumental and completely natural. Clara had sold her Seattle penthouse and bought a house 3 blocks from Easton's. Big enough for all of them, with a workshop in the garage and a yard where Sophie could finally get the dog she'd been requesting since she was 6. The merging of their lives had been surprisingly smooth. Clara worked remotely 3 days a week, traveled to Seattle for 2, and had restructured her role at NextGen to focus on long-term strategy rather than daily operations. She'd discovered she was a better CEO when she wasn't buried in every decision, when she had space to think and breathe and remember why the work mattered. Easton had expanded his custom furniture business, taking on 2 apprentices from the center's graduate program. He'd found that teaching had made him a better craftsman, forcing him to articulate techniques he'd always known instinctively. But the biggest change was Sophie. At 11, she'd grown into a confident young woman who split her weekends between the center and marine biology club, who called Clara by her first name but introduced her as "my dad's partner and my friend," who kept a photo of Anna on her dresser right next to a picture of the 3 of them at last summer's beach trip. 5 minutes until the dedication starts, Clara said, checking her watch. "Are you ready?" Today was the opening of the center's expansion. A second building that would house a metal shop, a pottery studio, and a textile workshop. The funding had come from a combination of sources: small business grants, community fundraising, and yes, another contribution from the Jennings Foundation. But this time, no one questioned it. The center had proven itself through results, through lives changed, through the steady accumulation of trust earned one student at a time. Outside, a crowd had gathered. Local officials, community members, students past and present, and reporters from 3 regional papers. The story had shifted over 2 years, from scandal to inspiration, from questionable relationship to partnership creating real change. Easton stepped up to the microphone that had been set up near the new building's entrance. Sophie stood beside him, holding the ceremonial scissors they'd used to cut the ribbon. Clara waited in the front row, her smile warm and proud. 2 years ago, Easton began, his voice steady and clear. This center opened with a simple idea: that everyone deserves the chance to create something meaningful with their own hands. That the work of building and making and crafting isn't just about the final product. It's about what happens inside us when we transform raw materials into something useful and beautiful. He paused, looking around at the faces in the crowd. We've watched people walk through those doors carrying pain and uncertainty. We've seen them leave carrying furniture they built themselves, and something more valuable, the knowledge that they're capable of more than they believed. Sophie tugged his sleeve. He knelt down so she could whisper in his ear. Then he smiled and stood back up. "My daughter just reminded me that I forgot the most important part," he said, "which is thank you. Thank you to every volunteer who gave their time, every student who trusted us with their learning, every community member who believed this work mattered." His eyes found Clara's. "And thank you to the person who saw potential in an idea and gave it the resources to become real." Clara's eyes glistened, but she was smiling. Sophie stepped forward with the scissors, and together, father and daughter cut the ribbon. The crowd applauded as people began flowing into the new space, exclaiming over the equipment, the light-filled studios, the possibilities contained in every corner. Later that evening, after the crowds had dispersed and the buildings were locked, the three of them sat on the front steps of the original center. Sophie was wedged between Easton and Clara, her head resting on Clara's shoulder, half asleep after the excitement of the day. "You know what I was thinking today?" Clara said softly. "During your speech." "What's that?" "That 2 years ago, I got on a plane running from my life, and a quiet man in row 8 showed me that the bravest thing you can do isn't escape, it's stay. Stay and build. Stay and face what's hard. Stay and let people in even when it's terrifying." Easton reached across Sophie to take Clara's hand. "You taught me something too. That opening up isn't weakness. That accepting help isn't failure. That love doesn't replace what you've lost. It adds to what you've survived." Sophie stirred, mumbling sleepily, "Are you guys being sappy again?" They both laughed quietly. "Maybe a little," Clara admitted. "Good," Sophie said, eyes still closed. "Mama used to say that people who love each other should be sappy sometimes. It means they're not taking it for granted." Easton felt his chest tighten with familiar grief and unfamiliar joy existing side by side, just as Anna had promised they could. "When did you get so wise?" "I have good teachers," Sophie said simply. Above them, the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Inside the center, the tools waited for Monday morning, for the next group of students who would walk through the doors carrying their own stories of struggle and hope. The wood waited to be shaped. The space waited to be filled with the sounds of creation. And outside, on the steps where it had all begun to take its final form, a family sat together. Not the family Easton had imagined when he'd first met Anna. Not the life Clara had envisioned when she'd built her empire. But a family nonetheless, built from second chances and hard choices and the radical belief that broken things could be made whole again. Not by erasing what came before, but by honoring it while building something new. The Brooks Craftsmanship Center had started as one man's dream and one woman's generosity. But it had become something bigger than either of them. It had become proof that when people choose courage over fear, connection over isolation, and purpose over comfort, transformation is possible. Not just for buildings or businesses, but for hearts learning to open again, for lives learning to rebuild, for futures learning to believe in themselves. And sometimes, if you're very fortunate, it all starts with turbulence at 30,000 feet and a quiet decision to stand up when everyone else stays seated. Because that's how miracles work. Not with grand gestures or dramatic interventions, but with ordinary people making extraordinary choices in moments that matter. Easton, Clara, and Sophie sat together as night fell completely, the center behind them standing as a monument not to perfection, but to persistence, to showing up, to building something that lasts. And in the morning, they do it all again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. so you don't miss any upload from us.